But the number one thing that I'm hearing is I can't find the deals because inventory all the way around the country is very, very low right now. That easy, obvious source of deals is not so easy and obvious anymore. With all the deals I did in the last 2 years, so we're talking 70, 80 deals, 2 of them came from MLS.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to episode 55. My guest today is known as the Real Estate Goddess, and she's also a self-described real estate geek who is knowledgeable on just about every aspect of real estate investing and believes it to be the best way to achieve financial independence. Vena Jones-Cox does all of her investing in the greater Cincinnati area, and she's bought and sold and or managed over 700 deals employing many different creative strategies. Vena also hosts the public radio show called Real Life Real Estate Investing, and she will be speaking at the RPOA's annual conference right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan on Saturday, February 24th of 2017 from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the DeVos Place Convention Center. Now, this is something you don't want to miss. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet, they're free, and you can go to rpoaonline.org to register for free. And if you do so, you'll get to hear Vena share her unique and up-to-date strategies on the fastest and easiest ways to wholesale properties for big money. Vena, thanks for being on the show today.
I am so pleased to be here and so looking forward to being in Grand Rapids in February. It was gorgeous there last time I went a few years ago in February, so looking forward to it.
Let's start off by just talking about you and learning a little bit about your background and how long you've been doing this.
Well, I have been full-time in real estate since November of 1989 when I lost my very short-lived job in corporate America. I worked in corporate America for about 6 weeks out of college, and it just wasn't a good fit. It wasn't a good fit for me, and it wasn't a good fit for corporate America. So I actually started out in my parents' real estate business, which was at that point, 20 or 30-year-old probably rental business. And I did, the usual stuff you do in a family business. I was the secretary and the acquisitions person and the bottle washer and everything in between. And after a couple of years of that, I sort of went out on my own because the awesome but very long-term strategy of getting wealthy in real estate wasn't in rentals wasn't really working for me at that age. I didn't want to be rich when I was 50. I wanted to be rich then, and the strategies that would allow me to get the higher income, like wholesaling, which is what I'm going to be talking about at the convention, and retailing, and the quick flip kind of stuff. My parents did not want to do. They were kind of dyed-in-the-wool landlords. They never wanted to sell a property, even though they really could have benefited from flipping some houses, especially during those times when things went wrong, in the rental business. And, I do own about 40 single family homes. It just seems like expensive maintenance problems come in clusters and vacancies come in clusters. So you don't get one bad roof, you get 3 in a row, or you get 2 furnaces that conk out in the same week. And it can be, it can be expensive to take care of those things out of your reserves and to have to build those reserves back up. But if you know how to flip properties and make $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in 3 weeks on one deal without having to rehab it, those issues become a lot less stressful. And had my parents known how to wholesale and then been willing to ever let go of a property, they would have actually had a much easier life. They would have been financially independent earlier, and they would have had their properties paid off earlier, which is a very big deal. So,
well, let's stick on this for a moment. So your parents seem to be very slow growth type investors, buy and hold, and manage their own properties. But it seems like that strategy was taking them was causing them a lot of hard work and maybe not as much payoff as you would have liked to have seen.
Well, my parents are both depression babies, so working 80 hours a week was not a big deal to them, right? That was just what you did to keep food on the table. And my dad actually kept his full-time job until around 1976, which would have been 10 years, I guess, into his real estate buying career. But for the first 10 years, he had to have the job to feed the properties. And a lot of longtime landlords will recognize that a mortgaged rental property, if it actually makes any money at all when you look at it over a 3 to 5 year span, it's pretty small money. And all it takes is one destructive tenant or one big unexpected expense. You thought you had something stabilized and it turns out it wasn't, to wipe out your profit for a couple of years on that sort of property, particularly with single family homes. You pretty much, as long as they're mortgaged, need to be putting most of the money you're quote making into reserve for vacancy and maintenance and long-term repairs. So the way a lot of people deal with that is they just keep their job, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It seems like a shame to have to keep a job despite being able to show that you're worth $500,000 or $1 million on paper. And I know a lot of people who can tell you, they can prove to you that they're real estate millionaires, but they still have to have a job because the $1 million is in equity. It's not in actual money that you can spend.
In a way, their job is feeding their real estate habit.
It is. And eventually, if you stick with it long enough, eventually that becomes really well worth it. Because when my father was ready to quit his job, and it was more of a, he was starting to have differences of opinion with the company, he was able to do that without looking back, because by the end of 10 years, he had several apartment buildings, a number of single family homes, and they were creating, between the cash flow and his ability to refinance them and take cash out, creating enough money to support a family of 5 people. And then when he did go full time, he got very aggressive about acquisition, and he bought at the height of his ownership, he had 150 homes and he had 100 apartment units, all rentals. So it was, as small real estate companies go, a big real estate company. But I would still watch something happen, particularly if it was with one of the apartment buildings. I remember there was one winter when the boiler in one of the big apartment buildings just conked out, and that was not a $3,000 repair. That was a $14,000 repair. And that meant we ate, ground chicken for a month, because all of the money from the business ended up going into that boiler for that month, and probably the month after as well.
No ribeye steaks for you.
No ribeye steaks. And we actually did, we lived very modestly when I was a kid. We lived in a, probably C plus B minus area in a house that my dad fixed up himself, and they always drove used cars. And it was a millionaire next door type of situation. It's, if you read that book, that was my dad, highly educated, lots of assets, didn't spend a lot of money. But part of the reason that he didn't spend a lot of money was because there was always that, what if the rentals need the money? I have to keep, with 100 rentals, I have to keep, or 250 at the height of it, I have to keep a lot of money in reserve, or I have to have the credit to be able to refi out and get some cash back, which is not the ideal situation. To me, the ideal situation is, don't ever refi your properties, pay them off and leave them paid off if you can pull that off. So, on the one hand, they had the psychological thing of, if I see a great deal on a house, I want to keep it. I want to buy it. I want to fix it. I want to put a tenant in it. I want to get the tax breaks. I want to get the income. And I understand that, but if they had taken some of those houses and instead of holding on to them and investing more money in them, they had flipped them and made, $5,000 probably would have been a good wholesale fee at that time in the 80s. They could have much more easily dealt with issues that came up and could have used that money to pay down the properties faster, because at the point at which they had a significant number of properties paid off, then the income was crazy. I mean, they were making insane amounts of money when the properties finally got paid off or started to get paid off. I think that the highest they ever got was about 2/3 paid off. But that is, I mean, when your mortgage payment goes away, your rental really starts cash flowing. So if you're a landlord and you have to make an argument to yourself about why you should learn and implement wholesaling, it should be because you can pay off that 30-year loan in maybe 7 years or 8 years, which gets you that much closer to the time when you can literally have passive income. Most landlords don't have passive income. They have income that comes in every month from the same deal, as long as they keep it managed, maintained, filled, all of that sort of thing. And that's not passive. It's not passive until someone else is doing that. And you typically can't afford to have someone else doing that until your properties are paid off.
So Vena, are you talking about wholesaling properties, being a buy and hold investor, but yet wholesaling other properties so that you can take that cash to pay down your existing loans on the other properties faster? Is that what you're getting at?
That's what I do. And I also use the money for, vacations. For landlords who haven't had one of those in a few years, that's where you leave your cell phone and your computer at home and you go away and you don't worry about stuff for like a week or two. You can also, you can use it for the stuff you need to use it for, but I'm not somebody who sells people on the idea of wholesaling based just upon the great lifestyle you can have. I think an important use of your wholesaling money is to speed your transition to true financial independence. So
just to make sure I'm clear in my head about your strategy, and it seems like it derives from what your parents went through and what some of the mistakes you saw your parents make is you have a buy and hold strategy with about 40 properties, it sounds like, but yet you wholesale a lot of other properties to help pay down those properties faster, and then at the same time have excess cash to go do other things.
Exactly. Yes, it's, I've been wholesaling I haven't been wholesaling quite as long as I've been in real estate. I started wholesaling in 96. I've done probably 600 to 700 wholesale deals in addition to another 300 to 400 rentals and lease options and land contracts and things like that are a little bit more long-term income based. So the reason for all the wholesaling has partly been, yes, I'm in it for the money, no question about that. But I heard years and years ago from a very smart real estate guru that it was a good idea to end up owning kind of middle-end bread and butter properties that people wanted to live in as opposed to lived in through like economic necessity. So what I bought when I first started investing was basically the cheap properties, right? They were kind of border zone type properties, low income renters, because that's what I could afford. That's the kind of property that I could get into. But as time has passed, I've transitioned those into houses in better neighborhoods that if I ever decided to sell them, I could sell them either to another landlord or to a homeowner. And the reason is those sorts of properties, they're more expensive. They don't cash flow as well in terms of percentage of value, but they're much easier to manage and they're much easier to dispose of. So a lot of the properties that come across my line of sight don't fall into that category. They're not the kind of property I want. They might be, I'm kind of picky about, I don't like to drive more than about 25 minutes to go see one of my rentals. So they might be out of that range. They might be 2 bedrooms. And I know a lot of people who like 2 bedrooms, but I'm not one of them. So those properties I try to negotiate as wholesale deals. I figure out what would be a really, really good killer price for a landlord to pay, or a rehabber who's going to fix it up and resell it to pay. And then I put it under contract for less than that. So in my market, and I think the number's going to be around the same in Grand Rapids from what I can see about median house prices. My average profit's about $7,000 to $7,500 per property. Anyone who's listening who is a landlord needs to get out a spreadsheet and say, if I were to do that 2 times a year and I were to take my after-tax profit from it, so call it, $10,000, and I were to take that $10,000 to the bank once a year and make a payment on my rental, how fast would my rental pay off? And the answer is probably in just a few years, and 5 to 10 years would be typical. Now, not everybody who listens to this podcast is a landlord. There's a lot of new investors that are kind of they're aiming toward that idea of I want long-term passive income, but right now it's not really in their viewfinder, because before they can get to the point where they're buying rentals, first they have to pay off their student loans, pay off their car loans, pay off their credit cards, pay off medical bills. They just have to get to zero, right? They're starting at a net worth that is less than zero. And then from there, they have to build up some reserve, personal reserve, because as much as most of us who are in the real estate business don't exactly follow the advice of the big financial gurus, the Sue Ormans and Dave Ramseys, they have it exactly right that you need to have 6 months worth of bills in the bank. Because if anything were to happen to you, from a minor car accident to I'm just tired of working, you need that money. And then you can start worrying about signing your name to the bottom of $50,000 and $100,000 loans. And wholesaling is by far the quickest and kind of least stressed, least entangled way of accomplishing that.
Let's take a little break here so I can tell you a little bit more about our 2017 Michigan Landlord and Real Estate Investor Conference, February 23rd, 24th, and 25th of 2017, right here in Grand Rapids at DeVos Place. And registration is free if you go to rpoaonline.org. And here's what you're going to get. 7 national speakers. Robin Thompson talking about buy and hold and rehabbing investment strategies. Tony Youngs talking about hidden market strategies in today's current market. Tom Zeeb talking about his rapid cash generation blueprint, how to quickly make money without money in real estate. Sue Huyuela, vacation rentals, Airbnb, the secret to doubling your rental income without tenants using Airbnb. Vena Jones-Cox, the fastest and easiest way to wholesale properties for big money. Brad Sumrock, talking about earning double-digit returns and retiring early by investing in apartment fortunes. And Mr. Landlord, Jeffrey Taylor himself, talking about his new Take Total Control program. And we have some excellent breakout sessions as well. We have our annual economic forecast, as well as Grand Rapids future development. Other breakout sessions include real estate investment and asset protection, our very popular Don't Do What I Did and Idea Minute breakout sessions. Come to the deal room at lunch. This is where deals get done. We have a special panel on house hacking, marketing and screening for tenants, prizes and giveaways that you don't want to miss. Registration is free. Go to rpoaonline.org to register and secure your seat right now. So you see wholesaling then as a great way to get out of debt to start with, and then achieve what's your ultimate goal is to pay off the loans on your existing buy and hold properties so that you're free and clear.
My ultimate goal is to be anywhere I want to be with anybody I want to be with and doing anything that I want to do. The real estate is just really a tool to get there. I'm sorry you pushed one of my buttons, because I just gave a talk last night on goal setting, on like how do you set and reach goals. And a lot of folks in the real estate business set goals that that are not, they're actually process goals, not outcome goals. They say, I want to own 100 properties. And I say, why in the world would you want to do that? That is a lot of work. And they say, well, because I've done the math, and 100 properties will give me $20,000 a month in income. And if I had $20,000 a month in income, then I would be able to do what I wanted to do. Well, okay, so the goal is not to own 100 properties. The goal is to have $20,000 a month in income, and that only because it allows you to do what you want to do. So when folks open up their minds like that and don't get kind of locked into a particular number of properties or even strategy and say, look, what I want is freedom, and I'm going to get there in some way that makes me feel good, is legal, is ethical, benefits my community, but I don't care if I own 100 properties that cash flow, whatever that number is, $200 a month, or if I own 20 properties that cash flow $1,000 a month. What I really want is the freedom.
And then some people would take that even a step further and say, okay, how long is it going to take me to get to that freedom? If they have a 5-year goal or a 10-year goal, you might look at that and say, well, how could you do that in 12 months instead?
Yeah, and you got to have a little bit of sense about it. There's no get rich quick. I mean, there's the lottery, but I have yet to find the secret of winning the lottery. There are paths you can follow. There are other folks who have become experts in wholesaling, have become experts in retailing, have become experts in creative buying, whatever the case may be. And if you do the same things they did, you will get the same things they got. The difference between them and you is likely to be that they had to figure it out for themselves. And it took much longer, and they made a lot more mistakes, where if you just do what they tell you to do, it does speed things up drastically. I have never done a new strategy that I didn't go out and learn from somebody who knew more than I did about it first, because it just makes everything so much clearer and easier.
Let's put that in context of your parents. You were a little frustrated with their method, which was kind of a 10-year slow growth method. Your whole thing was, employ some creative strategies like wholesaling to pay down those loans faster to get to that freedom quicker. What was the arc of your investing, and how long did it take you to get to a point where you felt as though you could do what you wanted to do when you wanted to do it?
I was actually a little bit handicapped by growing up in the family that I grew up in. God bless my mom and dad, but they were so obsessed with landlording. They were so locked in on that strategy. And to put the cherry on the sundae, my dad was kind of the classic entrepreneur who thinks he can do every part of the business better than anyone else can do it, and didn't really want to turn over any part of the management of that business to, employees, children, anything like that. So I did not get the business part of the business until I had been on my own for a while. From 89 to 91, I worked for them. And then I went out on my own, late 91, early 92. And I went another, 3 or 4 years, kind of puttering along, trying to do what they did better than they were doing it. And I did some lease options and things like that were cash strategies ultimately. And then I discovered wholesaling in 96, and I went all crazy and did nothing but wholesaling for 6 or 8 years after that. And I wholesaled a lot of properties. The first year I was in it, I did 36 deals. And I was no longer interested in tenants at all. I didn't want to have anything to do with any rental properties because they seemed, stodgy and unexciting and not fun. And then I got handed a 6-figure income tax bill one year. And I asked my accountant what I could do about that. And he said, well, you could buy more rentals because, of course, that gives you depreciation. It was sort of at that time, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s, that I realized that something was wrong with the way I was doing things, because I was working really, 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 really hard, and I was making a lot of money. but I didn't have any time to enjoy it. I mean, seriously, like 80 hours a week, 52 weeks a year would have been a typical work time frame for me. And I read a book at that time called The E-Myth, which is, as far as I'm concerned, required reading for all real estate investors. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it was like the guy had crawled into my head. And what he said was, as long as you're the one doing all the stuff, your business can't really grow because it's limited by your time and energy. And you need systems, and you need people to run the systems. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started working on systematizing my business. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit in the time I have available to me in Grand Rapids in February, because today I work 10 hours a week, maybe, in my wholesale business. Other people are responsible for things like making sure the mail gets out and making sure the, sellers get called and get interviewed. And, my responsibilities in regard to the business are fairly limited, and I'm doing the things that I'm choosing to do instead of the things that I absolutely must do. So it's been an evolution. There was not really a moment where I was like, oh, look, now everything's exactly the way I want it to be. I would say that by any measure that your listeners would vibe with, it was probably 18 months to 2 years into my wholesaling business that I was just never going to have a job again. Right. I was making so much money, and I had it pretty down pat in terms of what's the process here? What do I need to do? What do I need to ignore? But it was another, 7 or 8 years after that until I figured out that there was even a better way to do it, and that was systematize it and delegate it. And that's an example of sometimes there's just nobody who's cut the path for you. And when I was looking at other wholesalers, both in my own town and all over the country, because by that time I was going out and doing some training, all the successful ones, if you gave them a glass of wine and got them to sit down for a minute, would tell the same story about there's more deals than there is me, and I'm trying to do better time management, I'm trying to get better software, and nobody really understood that the real problem was us all trying to do everything ourselves and not wanting to turn any piece of it over to other folks, or not knowing how to do that.
So you got to a point where it seemed like process-wise, you had achieved your goal. You were making the money you needed to make to be able to leave a full-time job. But the personal goal of having more time and being able to do what you want, that was still 7 years away.
Yeah. Are we not supposed to be honest on this podcast? Because I know
absolutely
many times the story goes, I was sleeping on my friend's couch, and then I discovered this strategy, and then a week later I was a gazillionaire. And it's rare that people share, at least in a public setting, the second stage of that. The first stage is you've got to learn the strategy, and you've got to go do it. There's no virtual real estate. There's things that you have to do every day in order to make sure that the check is coming at the end of the deal, right? You can't delegate that to software. I wish you could. And then there's the second stage where you're doing it and it's actually kind of becomes second nature, and you're like, you're feeling good about the world, only you're starting to wonder, is there more than this? Am I just going to keep doing the same thing every day for the rest of my life? And that's where that second, phase of learning comes in, where you start saying, how could I bring other people into this, whether it be virtual assistants, which are, super popular right now, and they're great. They do have some limitations. There's some things a virtual assistant cannot do. I have yet to find one who can put a lockbox on a house for me. But that's a great first step, and a very inexpensive first step that most people can take pretty much, immediately. The learning in that phase is not really real estate learning anymore. It's business learning. It's systematizing and marketing is part of that phase, getting to be a really good marketer and hiring and firing people and things like that. So I would definitely encourage people to think right from the beginning, even when you're the one doing it, because you have to, because you can't maybe afford to hire somebody, and B, even if you did, you wouldn't know what to tell them to do because you've never done it yourself. Be thinking even in that stage about, how do I turn this into a passivized business? Because if I had done that at 20, instead of waiting until I was 30 and saying, holy moly, something has to give here, I would have been way ahead.
For my part, both in my personal life and professional life, I always look at, well, what is it that I'm doing that I don't like doing, or I can find someone who's better at it, and I just find someone to do it for me, because there's so many things that if I were doing them in the normal course of business or my personal life, I wouldn't have time to be on this conversation with you right now.
Exactly.
Let's talk about your topic when you come to the conference here in Grand Rapids. You're going to be talking about the fastest and easiest way to wholesale properties for big money. That's the title of your presentation. I'd like to know a little bit about what you plan on sharing with us. And I'd also really appreciate it if you kind of take us back to your first wholesale deal and how you ended up doing that in the first place.
That is an interesting story, at least to me. I actually found out about wholesaling by going to a real estate association meeting. I did not know that it existed before I happened to walk into a meeting and a guy was talking about it. And, he had a 90-minute presentation, and at the end he said, well, if you want to know all about how to do this, I'm holding a boot camp, and it's in Chicago, and it's 4 days long, and y'all should come. And it was $2,000 or something. And I was kind of heartbroken that he couldn't tell me everything that he knew about wholesaling in only 90 minutes. But I signed up for the boot camp, and I went out there and I took it, and I was very excited about wholesaling. And I came back to my real life and put the book on the shelf, like a lot of people do, meaning to get to it really soon. And then, thank God, something happened that kind of forced me into using it, which was that I got a call. I was marketing for my usual kind of deal, my usual landlord / lease option kind of deal. And I got this call from this lady who had inherited her father's house, which was in a town called West Liberty, Kentucky, which, as it turned out, is an hour and a half, 2 hours one way from Cincinnati. It's out in the middle of central Kentucky. And there were a whole bunch of complications with this deal. The town is very, very small. I was not able to find any comparable sales because there just weren't any sales. I wasn't able to get into the house because before he died, her father had given her grandfather a life estate on the property, and he didn't have to let me in and didn't want to. And furthermore, even if he had the right to live in that house rent-free for the rest of his life. So there was all of these, there were all these pieces that just weren't coming together. But she was so motivated to sell. And by our last conversation, because I kept saying, I can't do anything for you, I can't do anything for you. And by our last conversation, she said, if you can just give me enough money for a bus ticket to get back home to Texas, I'll take it. And that was $300. It was $300 she wanted for this house. And I kind of said, well, for $300, which would be all I had at risk, because realistically, if I paid $300 for the house and then decided it was a mistake, I just wouldn't pay the taxes, right? Just let it go to tax sale. Her uncle, her father's brother, lived in the adjoining house and was taking care of the house for grandpa. So I thought there was a half decent chance that he might want to acquire it. And in fact, she had asked him to buy it, and he said no because of a family fight that they were having. He said, I don't want to give you any money. So I went ahead and bought the house for $300 and wrote the uncle a letter And I said, I now own the house. You're not dealing with your niece anymore. If you want it, it's 15 grand. And well, I mean, the tax value on the house was $35,000 or $45,000. So I sold it to the uncle for $15,000. I never saw the inside. I drove by it one time. It took 3 hours to do that. And of course, once I got the check, I just wanted to do it over and over and over again. There was no more leaving the book on the shelf at that point. I often tell people, for some reason, women in particular seem to get feedback from their friends and family and colleagues of, you can't do this. You shouldn't risk it. You should keep your job. You've got kids to support. And I always tell them, yeah, they're going to say that right up until the time you show them the shut up check. The shut up check is when you do your first deal and you're like, did you make $12,000 this week? Well, that was my shut up check to myself, right? And after that, it was just the floodgates kind of open, and it was just a matter of figuring out how to do it over and over and over again. So, what I'm going to share at the convention is sort of how the process is working right now, because the number one feedback that I get from people who are, quote, trying to wholesale. I meet a lot of people who are, quote, trying to wholesale, by which I mean they don't really have any education on it. They don't have a super clear idea of what property they're looking for, or why someone would write them a check for it, or how to value it, or I don't know. They've kind of gone onto YouTube and discovered wholesaling through free videos, and now they're just going to keep throwing stuff at the wall and see what sticks, I guess, which is a very frustrating, time-consuming, and it doesn't make you any money kind of strategy. But the number one thing that I'm hearing is I can't find the deals. And the reason I'm hearing that is because inventory all the way around the country is very, very low right now. MLS listed inventory is at like 20-year lows. So that easy, obvious source of deals is not so easy and obvious anymore. And that's not where I'm finding my deals. I of all the deals I did in the last 2 years, so we're talking, 70, 80 deals, 2 of them came from MLS. So I'm going to share how we are finding the deals, what the process looks like, what you absolutely have to know before you try to wholesale a property, because the real estate community is pretty small. I mean, nationally it's huge, of course, but wherever you are, be that some little city in Michigan or Cleveland or Detroit or wherever, people know people. And if you get a reputation for being the guy who's always presenting bad deals that aren't properly evaluated, you're pretty quickly going to get written off. If you're presenting deals that make people money and that they actually want, you're pretty quickly going to get a reputation for the go-to person. I want everybody to be the go-to person. There's plenty of room in the wholesaling business right now for lots of different practitioners, but you got to be a good one. You can't sell bad deals even in a hot market. So I'm going to share that whole process and what the key skills are and how it's sort of working in the market right now.
I really appreciate your example of your first wholesale deal. Can you give us an example of a recent wholesale deal that you've done? And since you're in Cincinnati, I'd imagine that market is very similar to the Grand Rapids market.
It is. I have a handful of students in Grand Rapids. So, when they tell me about their deals, the pricing is roughly the same and the rents are roughly the same. So they are sort of similar real estate markets. I've made a lot of money in the last couple of years by focusing on the segment of the market that most people don't, most wholesalers kind of, blow it off. Most wholesalers want to sell retail properties to retailers. So in other words, they want the 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, good school system, needs work, going to be sold to a homeowner type property. And that is the tightest part of the market right now. Everybody is looking for that deal. including homeowners. Like, like there's so much competition for that kind of deal right now. And one of the things I've learned over 25 plus years in this business is that when you find that there's a lot of lines in a particular pond, you go find another pond. And the pond that I've made probably 75% of my money in the last 18 months to 2 years has been rental properties. And I go out and I find rentals that need anywhere from just a few $1,000s worth of turnover up to 10 or 15 or even $20,000 worth of serious stabilization. And I put them under contract and I sell them to people who are going to buy and hold them. And the less work they need, of course, the more popular they are, but there's folks who will do serious amounts of work to a house. And last month, wait a minute, what month is this? Yeah, December. I found a landlord who, I don't think he's actually retiring per se. I don't think he's getting rid of all of his properties, but he's getting rid of all of his properties in a particular neighborhood. And he had 2 of them that he wanted to sell and called us about one and then mentioned the other. And I said, hey, we'll do both of them if that's what you want to do. And I turned around and so I put both properties together. So like as a package, I put them under contract for $47,000. And then I went and found 2 different buyers who wanted them. And one of the 2 I sold for $30 and the other one for $50. $47,000 total purchase price, $80,000 total sale price. To 2 different owners, to 2 different buyers who were looking for 2 different things. And, it worked out great. We typically assign contracts rather than actually closing on houses and then turning around and reselling them. So that was part of this whole deal, was finding the 2 buyers and sort of getting them to the same closing so that the seller actually didn't know that the properties had been sold. All he knew was that he got his money on his closing statement and, got exactly what he expected and he was happy. And the 2 buyers went ahead and, one of the houses needed a lot more work than the other. That was why one sold for so much more than the other. And the one just immediately put a tenant in it. And the other one, I understand, just finished up the work on his property and it has it up for rent now. So landlord was happy, seller was happy, I was real happy. And that's a pretty typical deal for us right now, is those cheaper properties that are going to sell for, if they're distressed, they're going to sell for 25 to 35. If they're in really good shape, they might sell for 50.
And will you be talking about how to find those at the conference?
I will, as much time as they give me. I'm going to be giving away information with both hands for as long as they'll let me talk.
Tell us why people should attend your presentation.
Well, you know what? Forget why they should attend my presentation. If they've been listening for all this time and they're still not like, oh yeah, I definitely need to learn wholesaling, then don't attend my presentation. But attend the conference, because conferences are where you meet other people in the industry who later become your partners or your buyers or your sellers or your contractors or your agents or your mentors or your mastermind companions. Every once in a while, somebody typically under the age of 30 asks me or tells me that live events are going to go the way of the dinosaur, because you can get everything you want online. There's online communities and this and that. Nuh-uh. There is nothing that replaces looking your colleagues in the eye and hearing their stories at the bar and, really meeting people and pressing the flesh. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool introvert. Conferences exhaust me, and I still go and I still learn a lot and meet people and enjoy myself, even though I'm really tired when it's over, because I'm an introvert. You need to come to the conference. I mean, it's a once a year opportunity. It's not like they do this every month, and there are going to be people there that you have never seen before, even if you're pretty deeply involved with the group. And you don't know what conversation in the corner or what thing you hear from the stage is going to completely turn your investing life over for the better. right? So you just need to come because it's a one-time opportunity, and because you're going to learn a lot, you're going to meet people, and you're going to have fun, and you're going to be motivated and inspired. I always leave any conference I go to. I always leave with a page of things that I need to go do because I learned from other people that they're doing it and it's working, right? So that just go. Yes, come to my presentation because it's going to rock. But even if you don't, go to the conference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've made friends at these conferences. I've found investors at these conferences that I've done deals with. I've found other owners who I bought properties from at these conferences. So you can't beat being in the same location with other investors. It really gets the juices flowing. And just a reminder, the conference is February 23rd through 25th of 2017, right here in Grand Rapids at the DeVos Convention Center. And you can get your free registration if you go to rpoaonline.org. That's rpoaonline.org. Vena, so as we wrap it up, I usually ask what advice you would give investors, but I'm going to change that slightly with you because you mentioned women investors and how they seem to get a lot more of the cautionary warnings from their friends and family. So I'm wondering what advice you have for the women investors out there that pertain to them, and share some of your experiences.
I guess what I would say to the women out there, based on the concerns I've heard from them over the years and the experiences I've had myself over the years, is play to your strengths. It is true that my dad focused a lot more on teaching my brothers how to hang drywall and nail down roof shingles and paint a room, and because he thought it would be them that followed him into the business instead of me. And so, to some extent, I was a bit handicapped by not knowing the rehab part of the business, which is an important part of the business. But women are so much better at the people part of the business typically. Now, I don't want to say there's no guys out there who are good at it. There certainly are. But ladies, you are better at talking to sellers and getting to the real story and finding out what they really want and need, and then doing that for them and still making a profit for yourself. And you're better at hand-holding the buyers if you're selling a property, and that other stuff. That rehab knowledge can be bought. You can hire fellas to do that for you and to lift stuff. Don't try to be a guy in this business. Be yourself, and in a lot of ways, you'll be more successful just because you have certain natural advantages. And the other thing that I would say to the ladies is the same thing that I would say to any investor who was getting started in the business, and that is you have to do it. You got to learn it, but then you have to do it. You can't just keep learning and learning and learning and expect that someday you're going to be so perfectly confident because of everything that you know that you're going to run out and become a zillionaire the next day. Part of the process of learning it is doing it. So yeah, get the basic foundational education, but then go out and take the steps, and it will work for you just like it has worked for the thousands and thousands of people who did it before you.
Great advice. Well, Vena, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation, and I can't wait to hear you speak at the conference coming up in February. Again, you can go to rpoaonline.org to register for free. Thanks a lot, Vena, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to actually seeing you face to face.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.